Since this is our first podcast, even though this is being recorded at the very end because we forgot to do it, I'm the president of the Weber State Democrats, Ethan Bishop. I major in history and I minor in philosophy, and I will probably be here for every podcast because I do the recording and editing and all that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. My name's Ilana. I'm a communications professor and I am just a member.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about was this kind of issue of toning down the rhetoric on Donald Trump, and this goes in with some legislation that was just passed by the Senate. So this is according to CBS News. The Secret Service said Trump was not harmed after an agent spotted a man's face in the brush, later identified as Ruth, and a rifle along the fence line outside of Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach on September 15th. Federal authorities said no shots were fired at Trump while he was on the golf course, but the agent fired at the suspect, who fled. A prosecutor said in the latest filing that the suspect was in line with the sixth hole green, and Trump was playing the fifth hole when the Secret Service agent opened fire. Trump was swiftly removed from the area once the shots were fired, according to the filing. The FBI found in the fence line an AK-47 style rifle with a scope attached and extended magazine. Secret Service agents also found a digital camera, backpack, and reusable shopping bag hanging from the fence, a prosecutor said. Ruth was arrested about 50 miles away after a witness at the golf course shared a description of the vehicle and license plate, prosecutor said. The incident outside of Trump's South Florida golf course has intensified scrutiny on the former president's protection and came just weeks after he was injured in an assassination attempt at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks, opened fire from the roof of a building near where Trump was speaking. The former president was shot in the ear and two others were wounded. Another rally attendee was killed. And in response to these events, the Senate just yesterday unanimously passed a bill that increased Secret Service protection to presidential candidates, and now it heads to President Biden's desk, and he has signaled he will sign it. So I wanted to talk about this because there's been a lot of, right-wingers that they look at these recent events, people trying to kill Trump, and they squarely look at people saying that Trump is a threat to democracy, and they say, oh, you're the reason why people are trying to kill Trump and that kind of thing. And I just think that's ridiculous. I think it says a lot more about the actual person that Trump is when you're saying that he's a threat to democracy, and people are like, oh, I want to kill him. It's like, well, if they want to kill him because of that, like, I'm not saying it's justified to go out and try to kill him, but at the same time, it's like, there's a reason why people feel that way. It's because if you are an existential threat to democracy, that is such a threat to who we are. I think even as Americans, as people in Western society who want self-governance and that kind of thing. So I don't think the answer is just to say, oh, you can't speak the truth. Like, you should always speak the truth regardless of what it might make someone do. That doesn't mean to water it down. But yeah.
No, I agree with that. I also think it's important to look at the people who are targeting Trump. The first time he got shot, which was in early July, the person who was at the rally, who shot it up, he fit the normal profile of a public shooter. Mm-hmm. It wasn't somebody who was politically motivated. He didn't have it out for Trump, and he wasn't very strongly aligned with any political belief. He just wanted to show the world who he was and make a big scene.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with that first shooter, there was actually, when they went on his phone and that sort of thing, there was evidence he was trying to go to a Biden rally, do the same thing. He seemed kind of apolitical, and even, there's debate over whether this was his doing or not, but at his house there were Trump signs and that kind of thing. So it's like, when people are saying, oh, he was a Democrat or something, well, he was a registered Republican, and there's no evidence that he was even really political in any way. They're still struggling to find a motive in general for that. It's probably just kind of an apolitical thing. And I think a lot of the time, just with violence like that, political violence, that's often the case. People just kind of use sort of political events and rallies and protests and these sort of things as a pretext to just commit violence, and sometimes even to blame it on someone else. I think we saw this with the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the people who were, you know, destroying things, lighting things on fire, just committing violence, all these kind of things. Not only were they not with Black Lives Matter, some of them were directly opposed to them. Like I think one of them, like there's Kyle Rittenhouse, which is the kid that shot a few protesters because they were like coming after him and that sort of thing. It's all on video, but one of the dudes he shot, not only was he was a rapist, he was on the sex offender registry, and he was a known racist as well. So the person that was coming after him, that everyone was like, oh yeah, these leftists are like, it's like he wasn't even a leftist. He was the furthest thing from it.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense.
Well, and a lot of people who do violent crimes in the political scene just want screen time. They just want to be viewed, and they just want to go down in history.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with this one, this might be a little bit different because he did leave a letter. It says in the full article, I guess a few months earlier, he left a letter with, I guess his friend or whatever, that said like, oh, it said some weird, like cryptic. It didn't even really make a lot of sense. It said something about like, this was an assassination on Trump. Like, and then I think he said like, I failed you or something. So this guy was like mentally ill.
Yeah.
And he was a registered Republican in the past. In the past, he had also said to kill Democrats. And then later, he sort of became like a Republican against Trump. Right. So there's more of an argument that this is more like ideologically driven. But that being said, like that doesn't mean that saying, oh, Trump is a threat to democracy, that means you're in any way condoning that. And I also find it kind of disgusting that, like, even among the politicians like Biden and that kind of thing, they see the assassination attempt on Trump and they're like, oh, we need to make sure he's all safe. And they're like, so concerned about it. And then when there's like a school shooting or a bunch of people just getting killed in general, there's not nearly as much of a reaction when it's like, this is one person. And I'm not trying to justify it at all, but this is one person who's honestly a piece of shit. He tried to overthrow our democracy and did all these terrible things as president. And you're so concerned about his safety and well-being, whereas literal children are getting shot and killed. And you're not in favor of any kind of measure to protect them. And they say, oh yeah, the Secret Service needs to step it up and protect, Trump. It's like, well, why don't you say the same thing about the police and security in general protecting kids? Yeah. Like how we saw with the Uvalde shooting, how the police, they didn't even go in there for, I think it was like a whole hour when the shooter was just in there killing kids. So, yeah.
I think it's crazy because we were only a month into the school year and there was already a new shooting, and it didn't get nearly half as much publicity as it did when Donald Trump got shot.
Yeah, and he didn't even die. Or the other one, like, I have more sympathy for the man that got shot there. I think he got shot in the head, like in front of his like kids and his wife or whatever. But yeah, I have more sympathy for him. But just people are like, oh yeah, Trump. And the idea that, and I think it may have marginally helped him in the polls, but it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if you get shot, like, that's not going to change anything about you. That shouldn't change your electability or anything. I mean, you could be made a martyr or whatever, but in today's day and age, like with polarization and that kind of thing, I don't understand why that would shift the needle much, and it seems like it hasn't. So
I don't. Well, it'd just be pity votes. If that, they're like, oh, we should elect Trump because then he got shot. I feel bad for him.
It really doesn't make any sense. This next one is can be infuriating because it just shows the depravity of the GOP.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, the Nebraska GOP tries to circumvent democracy. This is from an article from Politico. So, Republicans' effort to change Nebraska's unique electoral vote system ahead of the November election to benefit former President Donald Trump has been dashed. Republican Governor Jim Pillen, a major proponent of making Nebraska a winner-take-all state, said on Tuesday that he, quote, has no plans to call a special session on this issue prior to the 2024 election because he couldn't secure the 33 votes needed to avoid a filibuster should the change be put before the legislature. Currently, the state splits its electoral college votes, with 2 going to the statewide popular vote winner and 1 to the winner in each congressional district. A change would be a clear boost for Trump, depriving Vice President Kamala Harris of a potential electoral vote from the 2nd District, the Omaha-based swing seat that has tilted blue recently. Now President Joe Biden won the 2nd District by around 6 points in 2020, after Trump narrowly secured it with a 2-point victory in 2016. Quote, given everything at stake for Nebraska and our country, we have left every inch on the field to get this done, Pillen said in his statement. Unfortunately, we cannot persuade 33 state senators. Pillen has said that he wouldn't call for a special session until he could guarantee enough votes in support of the change to a winner-takes-all system. On Monday, GOP State Senator Mike McDonald said he wouldn't support the switch, dealing a blow to Trump's allies' effort. McDonald earlier this year switched his party affiliation from Democratic to Republican and is expected to run for mayor of Omaha next year, meaning supporting the vote change could be a political liability. McDonald has said in a statement that he supports the legislature passing a constitutional amendment during next year's session so voters can decide on the change. Trump was not happy with McDonald's position, with the former president calling him a, quote, grandstander and shouting out Omaha Mayor Gene Stothert, whom McDonald would be challenging should he run for the position. Pillen also called McDonald's stance profoundly disappointing. Nebraska Republicans have been trying for months to change how the state allocates its electoral votes, but were unable to do so before the legislature session ended earlier this year. Efforts ramped back up in recent weeks, with Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina meeting with Pillen and state lawmakers to convince them to make the change ahead of Election Day. And this is shortly after Maine ran out of time to change the way they allocate the electoral votes to offset the political impacts of Nebraska doing so in the presidential race. So I did hear about this, and this is something that I also am interested in.
Yeah.
Just regardless of the actual political issues, I kind of find it interesting to look at electoral politics and that kind of thing. And I wasn't very concerned that Nebraska would change the way they allocate electoral votes because I knew Maine would do the same thing. So with Maine's 2nd congressional district, and these are the only 2 states in the country that allocate electoral votes this way, that they do it partly by congressional district, because Maine's 2nd district, it hasn't always been Republican, but you know, Obama won it in 2008 and 2012. 2016, it flipped red by almost 10 points. And then 2020, Biden didn't even make much inroads from Hillary's margin in 2016. So that's pretty reliably going to Trump. And then the opposite could be said about Nebraska's 2nd district because Kamala Harris could get it. So these Nebraska Republicans intentionally waited until after Maine's legislative session, so Maine couldn't actually change their rules to offset what they were doing. So they intentionally waited until, what is it, like less than 40 odd days until the election, and they're trying to change it. Because, I mean, I could even pull up like a map here to show like without, even though it's one electoral vote, that could mean the difference, and it could make it like a 269, and then it would go to the House. And the way it is, even if the Democrats got a majority in the House, it's a state-by-state vote. Yeah. So they'd have to have a majority of the state's congressional delegation, and they would not have that. So it would go to Trump if it went to the House. Or it would just make it so, you know, he could win a narrow victory, get like 270, because it would be a winner-take-all state. So this was clearly just a power grab. They're trying to make it so, you know, Trump will get all the electoral votes without actually competing for that congressional district. If he wants to win there, he should go there and try to make the case there. Or if they really wanted to make this change, they should have done it before, because I wouldn't even really have an issue with it. It would be the same thing, because if they changed it, then Maine would change theirs.
Yeah.
So then it would be a winner-take-all state for the Democrats. So it's just a blind power grab. The exact same thing or kind of thing happens in Utah with gerrymandering, making sure that no Democrats can win. Way back, there was a guy, it was a Democratic congressman named Jim Matheson, and he won multiple times in Utah in districts that they would gerrymander pretty much every time they could, and to try to get him out, and he would just keep on winning.
Stupid.
Like even in 2012, and this was crazy because Mitt Romney, he's Mormon, and
I actually met him.
oh really?
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Oh yeah. Well, I want you to explain that kind of your interaction with him in a second, but
He just visited my school for a little bit. It was during 2020, but all he did was like shake my friend's hand and be like, "Nice to meet you." But
oh really?
that's it.
Nothing else?
Nothing else really.
I know Governor Cox was doing that kind of thing,
Yeah.
but I heard he was kind of acting like he was like better than everyone when he was
Really?
doing that. Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, it does.
It's all about, settings, perspective.
Yeah, but even with Mitt Romney, like he won an overwhelming victory in Utah over Barack Obama, and Jim Matheson still won in his congressional district in that year. So it's just Republicans are always trying to do this kind of thing. Not to say that Democrats don't do it to a lesser extent, but Republicans do it a hell of a lot more.
Well, and it happens a lot in Utah. And when people try to break up the sections of Salt Lake City, you can see it happening so clearly.
Yeah.
Hate gerrymandering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what makes that with Utah even more terrible, and I plan to bring this up should, Blake Moore do his interview with us that I was talking about, is that in 2018 there was a ballot initiative that was passed by Utah voters for there to be an independent redistricting committee so that they would, come up with different maps that fairly represent the, will of the voters, not just gerrymandered to one party. Because before, I think it was like in 2020, they redistricted. And before that, in 2018, they did elect, he was an LDS Democrat, but he was a Democrat nonetheless. And he lost in 2020 in the same district because it still was very gerrymandered, even though he could narrowly win in it. And then even though they passed the independent redistricting committee, they just didn't care. They're like basically disregarded democracy and was like, no, we're going to completely gerrymander. So now Salt Lake is in all 4 congressional districts. So they do not have just one representative. There should be like a circle around Salt Lake, and they should have their own district. And frankly, I think that if there was a district like that, it should include Ogden, because like how we have, Rosemary Lesser, the only Democrat in the state house outside of Salt Lake, there is actually a good Democratic population here. So I think it should be connected, but Republicans just can't have that. So
No. You never really win. I do want to say, when you brought up like LDS Democrats, I remember my friend was talking about, because her mom's a Democrat, she's also LDS. She was talking about how, I can't remember, I think the leader of the church, he was talking about how Project 2025 goes against LDS beliefs. So it still shocks me that I know LDS people and they're willingly voting for Trump, even though Project 2025 goes against their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know which leader this was specifically that was talking about this?
I think it was during like a general conference or something like that.
Okay.
But
I'll have to look that up because that sounds very interesting. And the Harris campaign, they are reaching out to LDS voters, not necessarily for Utah because she knows she's not going to win here, but in there's actually decent LDS population in Arizona, and I think to a lesser extent in Nevada.
the one in Idaho.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I don't.
That's not gonna switch.
Yeah. I wish it would, but I guess there's some like ancestral Democrats in Idaho that used to be like that, but they've kind of
Right.
turned into Republicans. That is
I feel
also
like
interesting.
that tends to happen in like rural counties.
Yeah.
That's why Utah's like so conservative. It's because
Yeah.
you got Salt Lake City, St. George, and then you have all the little counties outside of that, and all of them are so conservative.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of just the way, like, just rural people, for whatever reason, they're more so in favor of, I guess, gun rights and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, lack of environmental regulation, although that will end up, biting them in the ass when they have their land taken away so it can be destroyed
Exactly.
for oil.
Well, and I don't really think they see many effects of the environment and climate change where they are, because in Salt Lake, you can see like air pollution, light pollution. They directly see the effects of that. But in like rural counties, you still see the stars at night. Like
Yeah.
you don't get the smog that other counties do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, like, if they're not in the cities, they don't see, like, forms of discrimination
No,
or
they
anything
don't.
like
Well,
that.
they don't see much discrimination because they are in like 99% white populated areas. So
Yeah.
they don't know what discrimination is.
They don't even see that many other people, even. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But although I went to Las Vegas this for my birthday last April 30th, and like there really is nothing like from here to Nevada. There are some spots where you can kind of see like there's
Yeah.
decent population centers, but nothing like Ogden, nothing like Salt Lake, nothing like Logan even.
No, they're
It's like,
just small little pockets when you're
yeah,
driving down the road. It's like there's a gas station and there's like 5 houses around it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the only way that Utah's ever going to go blue, like at least on the statewide level, and that's going to happen in order for anything to be done about the gerrymandering of like the state legislative districts, because that's going to be hell to try to break their stranglehold on that, just due to how, you know, crazily like just gerrymandered they are. Like, even if Democrats perform really well, Republicans are going to win by at least 10 points, like across the board. And like 10 points would be a good showing for the Democrats, even. Um, but, but yeah, like Salt Lake City is growing, Ogden is growing. And I think that's also partly why I wanted to do the Weber State Democrats, is kind of just to really lift up the voices of the people that live here
Yeah.
and the students that go to Weber State, so then we can actually try to move the needle in that way. Even if in 2024, she's probably not going to win Utah. I probably shouldn't be that pessimistic, but like Biden did better than Hillary Clinton in 2016, partly due to there's a third party candidate named Evan McMullen, but still, like, uh, if we could get Kamala Harris to win by, or not to win, but to close the gap a little bit more,
Yeah.
it's just that's how you turn Utah into a swing state and then eventually a blue state. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is Kamala Harris recently, and this is very recent news, came out in favor of killing the filibuster in order to secure abortion rights. So it's from The Guardian. Kamala Harris has called for an end to the Senate filibuster to make good on her pledge to restore the right to abortion through legislation. The U.S. Vice President, herself a former senator, told a radio station in Wisconsin that eliminating the filibuster, which sets a 60-vote threshold in the 100-seat upper chamber of the U.S. Congress, would be necessary to codify the rights that were enshrined in Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court ruling that upheld the right to legal abortion throughout the U.S. until it was overturned by a ruling 2 years ago. Quote, I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do, Harris told WPR, an affiliate of National Public Radio, on a campaign trip to Wisconsin. It cost her the support of outgoing West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, a former Democrat who left the party this year to become an independent, who said he would not endorse her candidacy because of her pledge. Quote, shame on her, Manchin, who is retiring from the Senate at the end of this year, told CNN, quote, she knows the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy. It's the only thing that keeps us talking and working together. She gets rid of that, then this would be the House on steroids. So that's so rich coming from him that he says that the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy when it literally empowers 41 senators who represent a literal tiny fraction of the population of the US, to obstruct massively popular legislation. This is why we don't have a $15 minimum wage. It's still at $7.25, and it's been that way since 2009. And this is still why we don't have, abortion rights. We have, 13-year-old rape victims being denied an abortion, women being forced to carry pregnancies to term even when it threatens their life, and all these kinds of things. And he has the gall to say that. It's like, this is the same guy who back in 2021, he tried to obstruct Biden's whole agenda. Like, they wanted to pass, it was this whole huge bill called Build Back Better, and
Yeah.
this kind of came to fruition in the Inflation Reduction Act, but which he did support. But Build Back Better, that was supposed to be a way, more far-ranging things. There was discussions of like paid family leave, a better healthcare system, all these kinds of social programs. I believe the environmental spending was also with that. There was more of like the Green New Deal, which, like I said, came to fruition in the Inflation Reduction Act. But even though the Inflation Reduction Act is so progressive, it's still, the stuff that he got done is nothing compared to what could have gotten done for him and then Senator Sinema from Arizona. And that's why earlier this year he switched from Democrat to Republican, or not to Republican, to Independent, which was basically just a show of, oh, I want attention and that kind of thing. It's like, this guy says the filibuster is for democracy. It's like, no, that's the antithesis of democracy. Democracy is when the governed is, or the government operates upon the consent of the governed. Okay, that's what democracy is. So to say that democracy is bending over backwards for this one, tiny piece of the population and that kind of thing, who frankly their ideas are wrong. They empirically harm people and all sentient beings for that matter. So it just makes no sense. And the only reason part of why he likes the filibuster is for corporate interests. Because, like with West Virginia, that's coal country and that kind of thing. So he's not in favor of all these sort of, clean energy initiatives and that kind of thing. That's why he wanted them to scale it back and all that kind of thing. So, yeah.
That's why a lot of people don't like Trudeau in Canada, specifically in like the West, in Alberta. They're lenient on oil. And so whenever he tries to invoke bills for clean energy, they keep attacking him, being against him. And I can see like a parallel happening over there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. It's just the corporate interest. That's a big reason why they didn't want that. It's like, and what's weird is it seems like, the corporations that line these senators' pockets, like Manchin, and it's also funny that he says this because he's like, oh yeah, she wants to abolish the filibuster for reproductive rights. It's like, yeah, it makes sense that he's saying that because he's not in favor of reproductive rights.
Yeah.
When they actually did vote on restoring Roe versus Wade, or is basically vote on it because they couldn't get past the 60 vote threshold for cloture to end debate to then actually vote on the bill, all Democrats supported moving forward to an actual vote of the bill to restore Roe versus Wade. So that was 49 Democrats at the time. Joe Manchin and every single Republican voted against it, and they would have needed 60 votes. So they didn't even really come close. They would have needed 11 more. So it's just disgusting that people will say that kind of thing. The filibuster didn't used to be how it is now. It used to kind of just be, you need 60 votes to end debate, but it wasn't like, it was more of a wholesome thing. Like, they would actually debate the bill with the intention of then voting on it. It wasn't like a mechanism to stop voting at all and just prevent them from doing anything. And another thing is, the only reason why things like the COVID stimulus bill, otherwise known as the American Rescue Plan, the only reason that got passed is through basically a technicality called budget reconciliation, where some bills that having to do with our budget, that gets past the filibuster anyway. So if we're making exceptions for things like that, why don't we make exceptions for like abortion rights and that kind of thing? So, yeah.
Real. I'm not an expert on many, like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just find it interesting because I think some aspects of American government, it makes a lot of sense, but it just gets abused with how it is now.
Well, and I feel like people are too polarized to actually come to census between each other. The reason why we have a two-party system is so one opinion can be showed, another can, and then they can come meet each other halfway. That's not happening anymore. Now, when I see debates, I see people just trying to prove who's right and who's wrong, rather than
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think we should meet in the middle, and I think that we should come to a better term. The reason why we have Republican and Democrats is so that Republicans can point out our flaws so we can build on them, and we can point out where they have logical fallacies and they can build on them themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's just like, even if, and I think Biden even said this, that some Republicans had come to him and they had said, "Oh, I want to support this, but like,
Yeah.
I'm scared of Trump." Basically, he would, you know,
I feel bad for Republicans because if they openly like disagree with Trump or if they say I don't like Trump, there's genuinely people who are like you're not a real Republican if you don't vote for
yeah,
Trump, which is stupid. I sometimes I think that he should make his own party. What was that one guy in like 19 somethings? He made his own party and he got voted for. There was like one election where this guy made his own party because he
Are
was
you
like
talking about?
I'm trying to remember.
I think he was a former president, wasn't
Yeah, he was.
he? Yeah. I
No.
forget his name. I should know because I'm a history major, but
Oh.
yeah,
No, I
yeah.
remember I remember looking him up for a while. I just feel like we shouldn't associate the Republican Party with Trump. I feel like there are some Republicans who have separated and become independent so that they're not associated with him because they just don't agree with him.
Yeah,
They're just too
exactly.
radical.
And that's partly why I wanted to start this group, and I put in my Instagram post like, one of the only rules for this group is to be respectful of other
Yeah.
people's ideologies, even if they're more conservative. Because I want the people to be able to join this group really anywhere from they're conservative, but they don't like Trump and they
Yeah.
would support Kamala Harris just because for the foundational principles of America, basically, all the way to like pretty far left, like even like socialists and that kind of thing. I think it makes sense for the whole political spectrum like that to just vote for Harris. And if they come together and they make their own, and that makes up the Democratic Party, it's like we'll win elections
Yeah.
all across the country, and it won't even be close because it'll just be like the Trump cult. And I think, and he said he won't run in 2028, so we'll see.
Ooh.
If he loses, it's like the Republican Party, they're basically going to be fucked at that point.
Yeah.
Because even if they put up like DeSantis or whoever in 2028, I think partly there won't be as much enthusiasm among Trump's base because they
Yeah.
just love Trump. I don't think they care as much.
I don't think so either. I think a lot of people have put so much effort into backing up Trump's ideas, what he believes in, and like creating like all their political views around what he says. And then they see other people running for presidency, and then they're like, yeah, but they're not Trump.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they didn't even come close in the primaries.
Like Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
Honestly, if Kamala didn't even get voted, I probably would have ended up like registering Republican just so a woman could be president. But Nikki Haley wouldn't even gotten close to being a
Yeah.
representative for the Republican Party.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, and she was trying to toe the line too. It was kind of just, and I did follow like the Republican primary
Yeah.
just because, like I said, I find it interesting.
Yeah.
And just to see how they would kind of toe the line, because we had like Chris Christie who would attack Trump and he'd be like, yeah, he's like a piece of shit, basically. And then he would get attacked, and then the people who were more favorable to Trump, they would get a little bit more support. But the entire time, in national polls, they barely would even get above like 10 points. I don't even think it was until it was just Nikki Haley and Trump that she was getting up to what, like 25% in the polls.
Yeah.
I don't even know how she finished. Like, because at the same time, Trump's performance, it's impressive for who he is, but at the same time, it's not impressive because he's a former president. And like, if, for example, if Obama could run for a third term and other Democrats ran against him,
Yeah.
he would easily clear upwards of 80% of the vote.
Yeah.
Trump, in like Iowa, I think he won like 51% of the vote. Compared to like, I think DeSantis had like 21 and Haley had like
crazy.
19%. So it's like, he still won by an overwhelming margin, but comparatively, if you would think if the shoe was on the other foot, there's still a lot of like Republicans who dislike him.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them have turned into Democrats, basically.
Yeah.
One of the last things I wanted to talk about, I kind of wanted to mention this kind of about foreign policy, because I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion with the whole thing with Israel and Palestine. This is very much related to it. So this is, according to AP News, quote, the U.S. is sending a small number of additional troops to the Middle East in response to a sharp spike in violence between Israel and Hezbollah forces in Lebanon that has raised the risk of a greater regional war, the Pentagon said Monday. Major General Pat Ryder, Pentagon press secretary, would not say how many more forces would be deployed or what they would be tasked to do. The U.S. now has about 40,000 troops in this region. On Monday, the aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman, 2 Navy destroyers and a cruiser, set sail from Norfolk, Virginia, headed to the 6th Fleet area in Europe on a regularly scheduled deployment. The ship's departure opens up the possibility that the U.S. could keep both the Truman and the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, which is in the Arabian Gulf, in the region in case more violence breaks out. Having 2 carrier strike groups in the Middle East at the same time has been relatively rare in recent years, but as violence has spiked between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah, both Iranian-backed militant groups, the Biden administration has ordered the Navy to have the carriers and their warships overlap for several weeks on a couple occasions. It will take the Truman aircraft carrier about 2 weeks to cross the Atlantic Ocean and get into the Mediterranean Sea. The officials spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss troop movements. There's already a Marine amphibious ready group in the eastern Mediterranean Sea with the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard, which is expected to be able to assist in an evacuation if needed. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin held back-to-back calls with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over the weekend as he pressed for a ceasefire and a reduction of tensions in the region, Ryder said. Quote, given the tensions, given the escalation, as I highlighted, there's the potential for a wider regional conflict. I don't think we're there yet, but it's a dangerous situation, Ryder said. The American presence in the Middle East is designed both to help defend Israel and protect U.S. and allied personnel and assets. Navy warships are scattered across the region from the eastern Mediterranean Sea to the Gulf of Oman, and both Air Force and Navy fighter jets are strategically based at several locations to be better prepared to respond to any attacks. So that's a lot with foreign policy and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a huge development that kind of just this, it is a militant group within Lebanon, basically what it is, kind of like Hamas in Palestine. And, you know, I did a little bit of research on this. I'm not the best with foreign policy. I don't know a whole ton about it because it's very confusing. There's a lot to know about it. But yeah, obviously a lot of this is provoked by the war in Gaza and that kind of thing. And like I said, that's partly why I wanted to bring this up, is because that's a huge area of discussion. And I think that'll be a huge thing that people will actually use against us as Democrats and as people supporting Kamala Harris, is because they'll say, well, she supports Israel even though she wants them to reduce civilian casualties. You know, they think that things like Hezbollah here or Hamas, they think that they're the good guys or they're freedom fighters and they shouldn't be like messed with at all, whereas they literally raped and murdered a bunch of people at a music festival, a bunch of young people. They, you know, engage in sexual violence, as I said. They are anti-LGBTQ. They are basically radical Islamic. They're a radical Islamic group, very reminiscent of like radical right-wing Christian groups in America. And I think part of a criticism I have of much of the left is they can't sort of look past, if someone is, I'll just say like an Arab or they just have brown skin, it's hard for people to think that, oh, they're actually on the wrong side of history as well, simply because of what they look like. And it's like, no, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense that the left is so obsessed with like Hamas and that kind of thing, because they're antithetical to LGBTQ rights and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Israel's perfect or whatever, but I think there's a big difference between saying Israel's perfect, like some right wingers will try to do,
Yeah.
and saying that Israel, they at least have the right to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a big thing with people not wanting to vote for Kamala, is it Kamala or Kamala?
It's Kamala.
It's Kamala. That's what yeah, I get confused. Anyways, I think a big thing with people not voting for Kamala is that they think that if they vote for her, there's going to be World War III. They're like, we're either going to have a narcissist as president or there's going to be World War III. I just don't think that's going to happen if she gets elected. And I think a lot of people are consuming media that makes them think that if you vote for this person, this disastrous thing is going to happen. If you vote for this person, something equally as awful is going to happen. But that's just not the case. And I honestly don't think she's going to engage that much in foreign policy to invoke a World War III situation.
Yeah. It really doesn't make any sense. I think part of that's probably like the misogyny of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. They're like, oh, a woman can't be president because
Yeah.
she's irrational. And
Yeah.
she's going to be on her period and she's going to start
Exactly.
World War III. Like,
And that's been said ever since, even before there was ever a female presidential candidate, like on a major ticket, like Hillary Clinton.
right.
People would just say that as like, oh, there can never be a woman president, just like it was common knowledge. But it's like, here you have a literal, even like you said, like if they're admitting that Trump is a narcissist, it's like he's also, I think one of the most dangerous things about Trump, if you just divorce him from all of the stuff with domestic policy, when you look at foreign policy, he's erratic. So who's to say what the fuck he's gonna do? It's like in the waning days of his presidency, it was also reported that he was considering nuking Iran. And Iran is a nuclear power. They're also allied with Russia.
Well, and their
And-
culture is eye for an eye. So if we
Yeah.
were to nuke Iran,
Uh-huh.
we'd get one too.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way to say like what Trump would do, partly because like we said earlier, like the people who are modern day Republicans, they look to Trump and they kind of follow everything he does. But honestly, he, and this by extension means they don't even really have an ideology, because he just sort of functions on like feelings.
Yeah.
Like we can say all these things about like, oh, he said that there should be punishment for women who get an abortion. He's the reason for these abortion bans, which is all true. But before that, way back, he was a Democrat. It's like he literally only switched to Republican to harness the hatred.
Get votes.
Yeah.
And he noticed that if he could invoke hate on other people, he could get the the Republican vote. And I feel like when he is president, again, he made so many promises. The only one he really kept that I noticed was like the wall, which is more like a fence.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I was looking at photos of it, I was like, that's a wall? And that looks like something you put at an elementary school to make
Yeah.
sure that the kids don't get out. Like, what?
Yeah, which is funny because that it shows such a lack of understanding of our immigration system, because immigrants, they have the right to asylum. So we are legally we have to let them in basically and process their case if they're seeking asylum pretty much. And that's why we had the overflow at the border. Like Trump, he would separate families and tear children away from their mothers and different stuff like that. And I think that did play a role in reducing border crossings at that point.
Yeah.
But he never fixed the underlying issue. And he, again, when there's a bipartisan bill, and Kamala Harris brought this up at the debate, and she's been rightly saying it, when there was a bill to fix this very process to make sure that you can streamline cases for citizenship, and you can actually, even though it is kind of sad and some people on the left would disagree with this, you can actually turn away migrants when it's so overwhelming at the border. And so they were prevented from implementing that larger measure. So then Biden signed an executive order that basically made it so when there was enough overwhelm at the border, you can turn migrants away. And since then, migrant crossings has dropped to like a 3-year low, like since Biden and Harris came to office. So it makes no sense, kind of just like a wall. There's also a lot of migrants who fly in.
Yeah.
There's also like expired visas. That's a huge reason why there's so many people here from other countries. It makes absolutely no sense.
Hmm.
And again, like that was one of the only things he did, and that was also because he diverted congressionally approved funds illegally to the border. So,
And I think when he talks about like the immigrants coming into the country, the way he gets votes is by making people scared.
hmm
People are afraid that, oh, these foreign people, which this is a bit of like a racist view that people have. People outside of the country are going to come in and they're going to take our jobs, and
hmm
they're going to crowd our elementary schools, and they're going to get rid of our possibilities or opportunities. I think that he kind of took advantage of that and how naive some people can be, and he drove that, and that's what got him the electoral vote, and that's what got him into office, and he keeps pushing it. Like when he was talking about people eating cats and dogs,
yeah,
which had to get fact checked, which didn't happen. He's pushing the idea that immigrants are some like evil people who are going to take over our country. And people believe it, and people vote for him so that that doesn't happen.
do you have anything else you want to add to the video?
Um, Not really. I love Republicans equally. I don't hate you guys. I just sometimes you make me mad. Yeah. Not to discriminate. I feel like I want to make an emphasis on I don't hate Republicans. I have many Republican friends, and they accept that I'm a Democrat. I feel like a lot of people think that they can't be friends with people of opposing political views.
hmm
And I think a lot of people kind of close their perspective when they do that, right? Not to like judge anybody on like their social circle, but I just want to put it out there. I don't want to say any beliefs because I don't respect racists or
Yeah.
like any of that. But if you have an opinion, I don't think you should be silenced. I think you should be able to voice what you think, why you think it, and back it up.